we're not playing the blame game, and I'm not going to do that on this show. But it's important to note that airlines under federal regulation have standards of care, and we are actually fined under regulations if we don't perform our basic functions. So the issue here, and what the government is saying, is that there are labor issues, there are staffing issues, there are operational issues that they're managing to deal with, and we're working with them as best as possible to resolve them on behalf of consumers.
And that was WestJet's response to ongoing delays at airports, including at Pearson.
Now, Ambaresh Chandra, Associate Professor at the Rotman School of Management, joins us live with his thoughts on the problems impacting travel at Pearson Airport. Ambaresh, great to have you here this afternoon. WestJet doesn't want to play the blame game. A lot of politicians want to stay away from the blame game. But in terms of your assessment of what's happening at Pearson right now, where do you see the fault lying?
I think there's a lot of reasons for what's going on at Pearson. And it's not entirely the government's fault. There's a lot of factors completely out of the government's control. But there are still some factors that the government could control, both before the pandemic as well as right now. But yeah, so for example, to the extent that U.S. Customs is short-staffed, that's not that's not the fault of the government or anybody in Canada. Although the dropping of the testing requirement now in the U.S. will help that. And the tight labor market is not the government's fault directly. But in other ways, I think a lot of people have now said that the sort of legacy pandemic era restrictions are kind of out of date now, and dropping those would speed things up significantly. The other thing the government really should have done for years now is acted on an expert panel report which argued that screening procedures needed to be streamlined and brought up to speed with the rest of the world, and sort of we're behind in Canada with respect to trusted traveler programs and so on. Those are things the government should have looked into well before, which would have made the current procedures, much smoother.
But it seems, Professor, that the current issue is a lack of staff on all fronts, in all areas of the airport. And we did learn that the government says they're going to be hiring 600 new employees, as well as opening 300 more counters. But realistically, how fast can that be done, and how quickly will it help resolve the issues at the airport? We're hearing that travelers likely won't see any relief until August sometime.
Yeah, in fact, my guess is even September, not until the summer peak is done. It's like no matter how fast the government now tries to hire, or Transport Canada tries to hire workers, it's not going to keep up with the surge in travelers that's just going to keep building for the next few weeks. July is easily our summer peak. That's when most travelers fly, and especially coming after the pandemic, that's when probably everybody wants to be traveling. August is the same. So even if we see 600 more screeners and airport staff and so on, that's not actually going to feel like improvement. It might feel like things are just getting slower and slower because there's going to be so many more people flying.
Do you think then that this is going to have, hearing what you're saying now, saying maybe not until September, that's another few months down the road, Professor, that's going to actually have a negative impact on the travel industry? I mean, if people are considering taking flights, particularly internationally, and they see this, and then they hear someone like yourself with expertise saying, this could be a couple more months, do you think that could actually cause less of a surge, shall we say, in this typical summer travel period?
Yeah, I guess the question is, to what extent are people still making plans? A lot of travel has already been planned for, a lot of flights have been booked. And the problem is going to be if the airlines can't honor those reservations because they're not able to, land the planes or fly the planes that they assume they would. That could cause some really, unfortunate, situations. But yeah, to the extent people are still looking to book for the summer, they have not yet made their plans, they're probably seeing these stories and they're, being a little, they're deterred. The other worry is that they choose then not to fly from airports like Pearson, for example, and instead they drive to, let's say, the States and fly out of the smaller airports there, or have to lower passenger numbers like Buffalo. And that would just be a loss to Canada in terms of our revenues, our taxes, our airlines, all of them would see a loss.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the option for people wanting to travel or need to fly to international places, whether they could just drive down to the U.S. or maybe even drive as far as to Montreal or Quebec. But do you think that it's all airports in Canada? Is this just a Canada issue?
It's actually not. It's most apparent at Pearson in Toronto. And it's not surprising. Pearson is our biggest airport, of course. It's also the biggest hub for Air Canada in particular. It's also this gateway where passengers enter the U.S. and go through U.S. customs, but also enter Canada from the U.S. or from other countries and go through Canadian customs. All of that happens at Pearson. So any slowdown is just going to be, felt, that ripple effect is going to be felt through the system. It's really a Pearson problem, as well as to a lesser extent, but still significant effect, at Vancouver and Montreal. So, that's why we're seeing most of these stories coming out of Toronto right now.
Now, it sounds to me that there are no quick fixes here, but one of the things that's been pointed out over the last couple of days is that the federal government is still only allowing international flights to arrive at a handful of airports across the country. Do you think opening up more international arrivals to more airports where they have been able to land pre-COVID would be maybe a quick fix or a solution that could help ease the burden sort of sooner rather than later?
Maybe, although it's complicated for two reasons. One is they need to hire CBSA staff at those other airports, which they don't currently have, and my guess is the reason they're reluctant to do so. The other thing is it's not that easy for airlines to just change their schedules and start flying people to other airports. I mean, these things are complicated. They're a complicated dance between the private airlines, the government, the staff that they need to hire, and so these things can't just turn on a dime and be changed by next week. It'll take. I'd be surprised if those things are well underway by the end of the summer.
Right.
Wow. Okay, a big challenge still ahead. Ambarish Chandra, Associate Professor at the Rotman School of Management. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thank you.